So now that you understand what Azure Information Protection is, the question becomes, how do you manage the solution? And there's two primary ways to manage the solution. The first is through the Azure portal. So I'll demonstrate that in a moment, but that's really the primary way to execute on most of the day-to-day functions that you would need. There's also a PowerShell module called AADRM, or Azure Active Directory Rights Management. And so that PowerShell module is specific around rights management type actions, and so I'll demonstrate that as well. So let's jump back over to the portal and view some of the items that exist within the Azure Information Protection category. All right, so we're back in the Azure portal, and in the left, you can see that I've got the Azure Information Protection set as a favorite. So let's go ahead and click on that. Now that the Azure Information Protection window has loaded, you can see it has gone to labels. And so these are the labels that I was talking about that allow you to apply classification to various documents. And we'll dive into more of that in a future module. Also included in here are policies, and so there is a default global policy that exists, but right now there's no individual policies that might be applied to specific users or groups. Going down a little further, you can see under Manage, we have the languages that are currently supported. And if we click on Protection Activation, we can see that protection status is activated, so you can activate or deactivate the protection status either here or through PowerShell. Speaking of which, let's jump over to PowerShell. All right, so we're over in VS Code, which is my preferred code editor for doing anything PowerShell related, but you could run these scripts really from any PowerShell terminal. And in the top half of the window, I've got a file open called AIP Action. These are some standard actions that you would need to get the module installed and connect to the service. Down below, I've got the terminal open where we're going to be running our commands. If you'd like a copy of this script or any of the other scripts that exist in the module, you can go to the link that's on the screen. It's my GitHub account, and I have a repository on there that is for Azure Information Protection specifically. If you haven't yet installed the AADRM module, the first thing you're going to need to do is look for it. So by running find module Azure Active Directory Rights Management, it'll go up to the PowerShell gallery and see if it exists, and of course it does. The next natural thing to do is to run the install module AADRM with a force so it doesn't prompt me a whole bunch of times. So I'll go ahead and run that and let the module install. All right, so the module has installed. And the next thing to do is to get some credentials that we're going to submit to the module in order to connect to the service. So I'm going to go ahead and store those credentials in a variable. So the user is contoso admin at contoso-ned.xyz. And I'm going to put the password in. Now I have those credentials stored in the variable, and I can run the command connect AADRM service and pass it the credentials that I just stored. By running that, it has now connected me to the Azure AD Rights Management Service. If we scroll down a little bit, here's a common command to run to just look at the existing configuration. So I'll go ahead and run that. And that pumps out a bunch of information, so why don't I expand the bottom window a little bit and scroll up. And so it gives us a whole bunch of information, like the BPOS ID, which we'll actually need to execute some PowerShell commands on the client side. It also tells you about some of the other features. If we scroll down a little bit, we can see that super users is enabled and that there's already a super user that has been loaded. And if any admin role members had been added, they would be in here as well. If we wanted to see all the other commands that exist within the module, we can run get command-module and pass it the module name, and it'll list out all the various commands that exist within the module, and we'll get more into those in future modules.